You are who you choose to be. It's bad to kill, but it's not bad to die. And what if a gun had a heart? Those who recognize these three phrases know that they're essentially synonymous with one and only one film, Brad Bird's The Iron Giant. But why is this the case? What did the film do to go above and beyond how animated stories are told and become a classic? How did Brad Bird do it with his first feature film? Well, to answer your questions, here's a deep dive on Brad Bird's The Iron Giant. Starting off our deep dive, let's talk about the historical context and the background of the movie. Around the mid-90s, the animation industry started booming after Hollywood studios wanted to capitalize on Disney's The Lion King. Animation became so popular to the point that the medium was used as a money printing machine, thanks in no small part to the success of The Little Mermaid, leading to the Disney Renaissance formula, an animated film musical. But as Bird was pitching The Iron Giant to Warner Brothers executives, he just thought, hey, why do we have to restrict ourselves to the Disney Renaissance formula? Why can't we just make a movie that's extremely different and discuss various elements such as military, paranoia, and politics instead of getting into animation for money? Warner Brothers wasn't too keen on supporting the film. After all, their last animated film, Quest for Camelot, ended up as a box office flop. But despite this, since the studio was starting to lose interest in animation as a whole, the team had a lot more creative liberties in creating the film into what it is today. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the Iron Giant's best asset. The movie was created using 2D and hand-drawn animation, except for the Iron Giant, which was made using CGI, making the film one of the first traditional animated films to incorporate a fully computer-generated character, despite having only been made in 2.5 years with a limited budget. Other films that use both computer and hand-drawn animations tended to look like two separate films, but the movie was able to take advantage of this. The film used hand-drawn animations for a simple and innocent feel, but employed computer animation for the Iron Giant to emphasize his size and solidity as he moved. One of the things that Bird was most proud of was how real the characters seemed in the movies. This is because the animation of the film reflected reality by drawing inspiration from real-life experiences and settings, along with paying very close attention to little details that conveyed intense emotion. Bird chose to set the film during the Cold War, knowing the underlying paranoia that the citizens at the time had, thus being able to draw the feelings of the characters from real emotions of the people, rather than crafting an entirely new world and setting. To build on this authentic 1950s atmosphere, the art team traveled to Maine for reference photos and inspiration from 1950s artists like Norman Rockwell, Edward Hopper, and N.C. Wyeth. They also studied animators like Chuck Jones, Hank Ketchum, and Al Hirschfeld, and Disney movies like 101 Dalmatians to really nail the look and feel of the 1950s for the movie. Even with all this attention to detail, the film's emotional impact didn't rely solely on dialogue. Although the Iron Giant only spoke a total of 53 words throughout the entire film, excluding grunts and yells, the viewers were still able to empathize with his emotions from his little gestures. From adding eyelids to a jaw sliding up and down, to altering the stiffness of his movements throughout the film, his actions changed from more robotic to more human-like. In other words, the movie was made with its story as the priority, and everything else would just cater and adapt to that. They were very intentional with their decisions in animation, such as they didn't make CGI or hand-drawn animations just for the sake of it, but did so knowing that it would contribute to the overall impact of the story. With that out of the way, let's talk about the movie's individual identity and discovery. In The Iron Giant, inspired by Ted Hughes' novel The Iron Man, Brad Bird wondered what it would be like if a gun had a soul and did not want to be a weapon, exploring themes of healing and consequences of violence as seen in the memorable deer scene. Originally, they planned for the giant to accidentally crush the deer and feel depressed afterwards, but then they realized that it would be hard to show him getting over it, so they changed it to the hunter shooting the deer with a gun. This way, the giant could still see the life and death and action without directly being responsible, sticking to the story's idea of a gun with a soul. Unlike most films that speak about death in a negative light and deem it as the worst ultimate outcome, the movie accepted the concept of death as something inevitable and something that we should not be afraid of. It targets the usual negative outlook on death to a common yet unreasonable source of it: killing. This new way of tackling death allows the lesson to leave a mark on not only children, but adults as well. The giant's journey to discover his identity starts when he's playing with Hogarth and reacts to Hogarth's toy gun by shooting at him in self-defense. This moment highlights the idea that guns kill, sparking the giant's quest for identity. As he learns about the harm caused by guns and killing, he faces a tough moral dilemma of who he should be. especially as he realizes he's turning into the very thing that he hates. In the signature edition, there's even a scene called The Giant's Dream, where he dreams about robots like him destroying a city. This establishes the nature versus nurture theme, showing the giant choosing to go against his destructive programming because he knows it's wrong. It also makes his line during his sacrifice more intense and heartwarming, as the deleted scene reveals that the background of the giant was more akin to Atomo, who Hogarth teaches as bad.
Oh, that's Atomo, the Metal Menace. He's not the hero, he's the villain. He's not like you.
Overall, the Iron Giant learns a lot from Hogarth, and you can see it based on how he acts throughout the movie. At first, he moves rather stiffly like a robot, but later on, he acts more like a human, even panting with fear when he sees Hogarth, and calming down after being a weapon during the military scene. Now moving on to the fears for the Cold War. This theme of transformation and understanding is also reflected in the characters of Mansley and General Hogarth, who represent two different kinds of men in war, capturing the paranoia of the Cold War era. So let's start off with Mansley, shall we? So Mansley was led by fear and would do anything to save themselves, to the point of labeling everything that was different from him as a threat, even before they showed signs of being one. While General Hogarth was more reasonable and logical, who was still aware of the lives being put at risk, avoiding unnecessary escalation. Unlike other movies that glorify dying for one's country, the movie shows General Hogarth's understanding of how many senseless loss of life can result with that mindset, in contrast to Mansley's reckless attitude, justification of heroism, and martyrdom. Another is Dean and Mansley, representing opposing attitudes, with Dean being patient and understanding, while Mansley was full of fear and masking this power and being on the offensive. This duality is also within us that reflects both our best and worst sides, and the choice in how we treat others. It ties into the themes of identity and self-discovery as we decide who we want to be. Moving on from these character dynamics, The Iron Giant was specifically meant to be a film enjoyable by a wide demographic, encompassing both children and adults, since the film had the intention of having a story first, then animation second. In contrast to some animated series that try to combat the stigma around animation, The Iron Giant appeals to both children and adults rather than separating the two. The film does this by relying heavily on the portrayal of themes. Despite containing heavy themes, their portrayal became digestible and enjoyable to both audiences. It tackles unexpected themes like wars driven by xenophobia, anti-war messages, and complex moral questions about killing and death. The movie found the need to include themes and lessons that both children and adults need to learn. Thus, it didn't share the cliché messages that children's movies tend to focus on. There's a balance between explicit messages, such as Hogarth teaching the giant about souls and death, making it clearer for younger audiences, and implicit moments like the deer sensing the giant's gentleness, which adds depth to adults without it feeling like a lecture. As a short history lesson, animation evolved from being aimed at adults in the early 20th century theaters to becoming closely tied with children's entertainment. So, to make sure that the film didn't give the impression that it was a children's movie, Bird changed the previous introduction logo of Warner Brothers with Bugs Bunny to one similar to those used in older Looney Tunes cartoons. Now let's talk about one of the biggest factors in making this movie a classic, the Iron Giant's themes and messages. So, Bird didn't want this movie to follow the Disney formula of including musicals or pets or sidekicks for merchandising purposes. Unfortunately, the movie was seen as a box office failure, bringing in only around $31 million worldwide against a $50 million budget. But it actually wasn't because of the story, but rather because of the lack of marketing, making it one of the biggest marketing mishaps in mainstream movie history. Especially after the box office flop that was Quest to Camelot, the studio just wasn't ready to spend big on advertising another animated movie. So the film's limited marketing meant that audience didn't know it was actually being released. Despite its initial setbacks and deviation from conventional filmmaking methods, the movie defied expectations by becoming a classic and one of the best animated films of all time due to its powerful message and compelling story. Its success wasn't driven by budget, marketing, studio representation, or following movie-making trends. The film's impact on audience ultimately hinges on its message, a testament to animation's ability to resonate as deeply as live-action films. Now let's take a deeper dive on this impact that it had on its viewers by looking at the film's reception over time. Now, it was said that Bird's favorite moment during production was seeing the crew's emotional reaction to a sequence where the Iron Giant learns what a soul is, which he described as pivotal and deeply resonant, contributing to the film's incredibly high test screening scores. In fact, they were the highest that Warner Brothers had seen at that point in 15 years. Over time, the Iron Giant was highly praised for its storytelling, animation, and emotional depth. Despite a modest box office performance, it gained strong critical reception. with the movie winning multiple awards, including 9 Annie Awards in November 1999, where it garnered a win for every category it was nominated for, including Outstanding Achievement in an Animated Feature. Because of its overarching story and great themes and messages, people who did know about the Iron Giant became very attached to it and protective of it to some extent, and shared it to those who haven't, making it a film that is continuously being rediscovered until today. The movie became more recognized when it was later available to watch through home video rather than in theaters. To end things off, I'd like to give my personal thoughts on it. Now, I always thought that animated cinema was this kind of thing for children or for, let's say, kids. And since they were such a big part of my childhood, I worried about not liking them as I grew older. But while this was true, some films didn't age well, like, let's say, Turbo or Cars 2. I'd say that some did. And one of these was definitely The Iron Giant. The Iron Giant was a movie that I rediscovered in the process of making this video. And honestly, it really reaffirmed to me that animation is not for kids. Animation is storytelling, and storytelling is anything.